When Monica and I last saw each other, I never thought I'd see her again like this. We had signed divorce papers in the same room, a bitter formality that put an end to what had already been true. Our marriage had ended long before the ink dried, but meeting her now, after all these years, made us nothing to one another. I had simply stopped laughing and being carefree, because it felt like revisiting a wound I believed had already healed. Before going home to enjoy the evening, I stopped by a restaurant for a quick dinner. Nothing fancy, just a nice meal to cap off the day. Being alone, I had grown used to the scent of sizzling steak and garlic butter. So for a little while, I allowed myself to sink into the ease of a typical evening. Then I heard them. I wasn't even facing their table, but I instantly recognized Monica's voice, the woman who had once promised to love me forever. Now, sat across from her new husband, Greg. I wasn't the kind to eavesdrop, but Greg's voice cut through the cozy din of the cafe. They weren't exactly being discreet, he said, laughing. No wife, no kids, no life. His condescending tone cut through me. Monica laughed too, her voice ringing louder than the other conversations in the room. The space around me seemed to shrink. Their words pressed against my chest like a slow, deliberate weight. Other customers looked at me, some quietly, some not, trying to conceal their amusement. The world blurred for a brief moment. My body reacted faster than my mind. The old me, the man I used to be, crept up my spine with a familiar sting of embarrassment. I would have clenched my fists, ready to retaliate if Monica had struck out at me back when we were dating with her incisive, vicious words. But that man was long gone, buried beneath the weight of the lessons I had learned. I took a deep breath. My heart remained calm. I picked up my glass of water, took a slow sip, put it down, and then I did something they didn't anticipate. I grinned, not a forced smile, not a smirk. A slow, knowing smile that made Greg's confidence falter just for a moment. Monica shifted in her chair. Her laughter faded, just a little. They expected a reaction, a breakdown, but I refused to give them the satisfaction. Without a word, I took out my wallet, left enough money to cover my meal, and got up. I didn't even glance in their direction as I walked out. I still heard their laughter behind me. But now, it was hollow. 3 days later, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. At first, I ignored it. I had no reason to listen to whatever garbage Greg or Monica had to say. But then, I listened to the voicemail. Their voices were different, no longer mocking. Now they were frantic. Monica's voice trembled through the speaker, pleading for me to call her back. Greg, no longer the arrogant man from the restaurant, sounded desperate. Something had happened. Something big. At first, it was easy to ignore. I had spent years breaking the habit of answering when Monica called. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. But the calls didn't stop. The voicemails piled up. Monica, once so self-assured, was now practically begging for my attention. Her voice, tense, chaotic, was nothing like the woman who had laughed at me just days ago. I deleted the messages. Then Greg started calling. Greg, the man who mocked me in public, was now sending me texts. The arrogance was gone. Instead, his words were laced with something I never expected from him. Panic. It's serious, dude. We need to talk. I sat there, phone in hand, debating my next move. I owed them nothing. Whatever mess they were in, it was their problem, and honestly, I liked the idea of ignoring them. But the sheer number of calls made me wonder, what had happened? Why had Greg swallowed his pride and reached out to me? Finally, when Monica called again, I answered, calm, detached. There was a pause, then a sharp intake of breath. "Oh, thank God," Monica gasped. She sounded afraid. I spoke bluntly. "What do you want?" "We need to meet. Now." I let her sit in her desperation for a moment before finally asking, "Why?" In the background, I heard Greg's voice. Low, urgent. Monica hesitated. I could hear the weight in her voice, the trembling in her breath. This wasn't someone calling to gloat. This was someone in real trouble. She sighed, frustrated. "We need your help," I smirked, even though she couldn't see me. "You think I can help?" Then Greg's voice broke through. "Look, man, whether you like it or not, you're involved." I scowled. Greg's words settled into my mind like a stone dropping into deep water. Whether I liked it or not, I was involved. Up with falsified documents, and Monica was aware that she wasn't an innocent spectator, which is what made my stomach turn. She had approved several bogus transactions, enabling it to happen. The more I discovered, the more irate I got. Had she ever loved me? Or had I only been a stepping stone in her game of lies? For years, I had been wondering if I was the cause of our marriage's failure. But now I realized the truth. She had always been this way, but I was too blind to notice it. When my phone rang the following morning, it was Monica. I let it go. Greg then called, but I ignored his voicemail as well. Next came the text from Monica. "Please, Greg, let's chat. We can resolve this. Don't act hastily. I made an error, all right, but let's work this out." Greg: "Come on, man. You don't have to get lawyers involved." I chuckled angrily. It was too late. So I typed a single reply. "See you in court." I could picture their expressions when they read it. They took from me, humiliated me, and now they regretted it. And I didn't waste any time. They were going to face actual repercussions soon. After everything, I discovered the faked signatures, the pilfered funds, the deception. Consequently, I knew I had to address them, not by calling, not by texting, face to face. I set up a meeting, because I wanted to witness the fear in their eyes when they realized they had lost. The meeting was at Monica's house, the same house she had once shared with me. Before deciding I was no longer suitable. When I arrived in the driveway, I took a deep breath. This illusion they had built, it was about to crumble. I kept myself composed. I wasn't here to argue. I was here to put an end to this. Monica opened the door, her face tense with fear. "Come in," she murmured, somewhat out of breath. I entered without saying a word. The house looked different, less put together, as though their world was already falling apart. Greg was in the living room, standing, rigidly by the couch, exhausted by worry. His usual haughtiness was gone, and in its place, something that nearly looked like fear. I took the financial documents out of my pocket and threw them onto the coffee table. "Let's talk about these loans." Greg stayed silent, his mouth tightening. Monica winced at the sound of the papers hitting the table. I crossed my arms. "Tell me why my name appears on these, Monica." Her hands trembled as she picked up the papers, flipping through them as if she had never seen them before. Greg had the audacity to roll his eyes. "It's just paperwork," he remarked dismissively. "You wouldn't have used that money anyway." My body tensed. I had expected lies. I had expected excuses. But this was blatant arrogance. I stepped closer, forcing Greg to meet my gaze. My voice was dangerously low. "You took my identity. You forged my signature. You put me $400,000 in debt. And you think it's just paperwork?" Monica touched my arm. "Please, let's just talk." I pulled away. Greg sneered. I could see it in his face. He thought I was bluffing. I leaned in, my voice barely a whisper. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." His cockiness faded instantly. "Look, man, this doesn't have to go legal," Greg stammered. I laughed coldly. "Unfortunately, it's far too late for that." I turned to Monica. "You knew, didn't you?" She hesitated. A pause. Then, in a barely audible voice, "Yes." A bitter smile tugged at my lips. You were already knee-deep in this while laughing at me in that restaurant, weren't you? Monica didn't respond. She didn't have to. I straightened up, took a breath. Greg, this is what's going to happen. He scoffed. Oh, yeah? And what's that? I'm going to bury you. Greg's smirk faltered. I picked up the papers and held them. Up. My lawyer has already frozen every account tied to my name. Every loan you took out in my name? Contested. And the banks? They're launching their own investigation. Monica exhaled sharply. Please, don't do this. I cut her off. In addition, the private investigator I hired discovered. Greg stiffened. Your little embezzlement scheme. Monica's eyes widened in horror. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and tapped the screen. An audio recording began to play. Greg's own voice filled the room. I just moved the money around. A few fake invoices. Nothing major. Won't even get flagged. Greg went pale. I stopped the recording. I can prove everything. Silence. Monica turned to Greg in shock. It was clear. Trust between them had just crumbled. Greg clenched his jaw. What do you want? He demanded. I smiled. Justice. Monica made a strangled noise. This will destroy us. I looked at her coldly. You destroyed yourselves. She reached for my hand, tears welling up. I pulled away. You lost my sympathy the moment. You forged my name. Greg was sweating now. He raked a hand through his hair. If we go down, you go down too. I smirked. Wrong. You two have been digging your own graves. I've just been cleaning up my name. I turned to leave. At the door, I paused. Without looking back, I said, You should start looking for a lawyer. You're going to need one. Then I walked away. They thought they could get away with it. They thought I would roll over and accept the destruction they caused. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. The storm within me raged as I drove home. This wasn't about anger anymore. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. Monica and Greg thought they could steal from me, humiliate me, erase me. But they were mistaken. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I was already planning my next move. The following morning, I was at my lawyer's office. I wasn't just going to clear my name, I was going to destroy them. I dropped a heavy folder of evidence onto Mr. Coleman's desk. I want everything locked down, I said firmly. He adjusted his glasses and reviewed the documents. You really want to go after them, don't you? I didn't flinch. They didn't hesitate to ruin me. I won't hesitate to return the favor. He nodded. And so, we filed the criminal charges. Days later, my lawyer called. They're panicking, he said, barely containing his amusement. The banks had frozen their accounts. The fraud was exposed. And now, law enforcement was stepping in. Greg and Monica were about to face the full force of the law. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. They deserved every second of it.